So you're new to zines and you're worried you might be doing it wrong. Let me just start off by saying you can't really do zines wrong. I mean, you could totally spend a lot of money producing it, printing it, shipping it, then sure, then in that case, yeah, you'd be doing it wrong. But in a very general sense, zines are very free. They're about making whatever you want, publishing it yourself, and distributing it to others. And distributing can mean you can sell it, it means you could trade it with somebody else, or you could simply give it away for free. There really are no rules to it, but since you're new to zine making, you might think that there are. So I get a lot of questions about what mistakes can I avoid when I'm first starting to make zines, and that's a pretty loaded question because I don't think that mistakes are necessarily a bad thing. I think when you're starting off making your zines, you should make a lot of mistakes. I think you should do a lot of trial and error. I think you should waste a lot of time and a lot of paper. But if you want to save some time and learn from someone that's been doing it for a while, I can share with you my tips. These are not technical zine tips because, like I said, I think your zines should look a little janky, a little ugly, a little messy. In terms of zines, I like to think about it in a very mindset-ish kind of way. Your zines are very free. They should really reflect who you are as a person, and maybe if you're a little bit more rigid and you're a little bit more perfectionist, that's where you come across these questions of like, can I be doing it wrong? Or maybe it's supposed to look like this. So that's why I'm making this video, because one, a lot of people asked about mistakes to avoid, but also I think it really just starts with how you think about and approach zines. Okay, so starting off at number one, stop overcomplicating the layout. Okay, and what I mean by this is that a lot of people, when they start off making zines, they want it to be perfect and polished right away. I think that's a big mistake. I think you should just let yourself be free and let whatever comes out comes out. This is not to say you can't have a general guideline of what you're doing or even a draft. I really highly recommend the draft, but what I'm saying is getting beat up over the fact that it doesn't look a certain way. And of course, maybe you have a vision in your mind, right? You want it to look how it looks in your brain, and you're trying to convey that on paper. That honestly takes time. You have to be really patient with yourself when you're creating and allow yourself to make some pretty bad art, to make some bad zines, you know? Going for a professional polished look right off jump is a problem, and here's why I think that. I think it's an issue because you get too wrapped up in the end result instead of the journey of making a zine, right? Zines thrive on authenticity, not perfection. So when you start over designing or over complicating how the layout will look and be to the point where you just get so frustrated you just give up the process completely, that kind of kills the DIY charm of zines and what they're about. I think people see very cool looking zines that are made on maybe Canva or Procreate or Photoshop and say you're not as technologically advanced, so then you assume you can't make zines like that. Let me just start off by saying you should start with the basics, okay? If you're just starting to make zines, you should start off in the traditional sense of zines, where you take one single sheet of paper and fold it into an 8-page mini zine. Or if you want more pages, more space, bigger zine, then you make a folio size zine, which means you take a sheet of printer paper, which is typically 8.5 by 11 inches, take a couple of sheets of those, fold it in half, and boom, you have a bigger zine. I really think that when you're first starting to make zines, you should start with the beginning of time, right? Like with anything, you don't feed a baby steak. A baby cannot chew steak because they don't have teeth. They can't digest it. Oh my gosh, that would be bad for their little baby tummy system. What you do is you start off with mushy foods, things that they can handle. As they grow and develop teeth, then they can have a little bit of crunchier foods, maybe some crackers. And then as they age, then they get to the steak. I don't know if that's a good example, but y'all know what I mean. You start with the building blocks. You start with the little blocks at the bottom, and then you start adding some on top, right? Because you need the foundation to be strong. That way you can add more, and then you can add more and add more. You don't just start off with someone at the top of the pyramid or at the top of the building blocks. You have to start at the bottom. And I know when I say start at the bottom, it sounds so like elementary, and it sounds like, I just want to get to the final result. I just want my zine to look awesome. You have to start somewhere, okay? And I'm saying this from experience. When I first started, my first zines were the 8-page mini zine and the typical folded up folio zine, and they don't look like how my zines look now. So maybe you see someone like me that makes a lot of experimental zines or zines out of trash or zines where there's a lot going on. I had to work my way up to that. I didn't just start making zines like that. It started off 7-8 years ago, me making the 8-page mini zines and the typical standard folio zine that you fold up with the 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. I think when you're first starting to make zines, you should definitely focus on expressing yourself over trying to impress other people. I always say this in my videos, focus on expression rather than impression. And once you're expressing yourself, it will call in the people that are similar to you, like-minded as you, and like your art style. You can always always make a mess as you go and then clean it up later. You know how many times I do that? I make so many draft zines of a zine. Like, I show the final result because that's what I'm working to do with my content. I want to show you the final zine, but I don't always show all the freaking drafts I make. Really be flexible with how this is and don't overcomplicate the layout, okay? I would say keep it really simple, but be imaginative with how simple it is. I think when you have less space to work with, it really pushes your brain. It really challenges you to think outside the bounds. And that's a great muscle to build up. So over time, you can think about how can you expand out the bounds? How can you work with an 8-page mini-zine in an unusual way? Make unusual shapes, maybe incorporate trash or interactive elements. How can you take a standard folio size zine and make that something that's really fun to flip through? Or maybe you like to write a bunch of articles and interviews. Maybe you can include QR codes so it leads to a video about an interview or something like that. You know, like once you start with the basics, then you can expand on how you can evolve the basics. That's pretty much how my zines evolved over time. I started at the bottom and I started with just making the 8-page mini zines and the folio zines, and then they turned into something completely different, which then helped develop my voice as a zine maker. I think when a lot of people see my zines, they can identify it as me. It's almost like my unique creative zine fingerprint. You don't get to develop your style just right off the jump. You have to work on it. You have to carve and whittle away at it, and it's annoying. Yes, I'm not gonna lie, it is annoying. But the more that you work on it, the more you develop something that's uniquely your own, and no one can take that away from you. All right, and the second mistake that I would avoid if I were just starting to make zines is kind of like number one, but it's more specific in terms of thinking about what people think about your work, okay? So the second mistake I would avoid is trying to make your zine marketable. I think now with the age of social media, Instagram, TikTok, I think it puts a lot of pressure on artists to create content rather than focusing on the quality of their work. And I'm saying this as someone that has definitely got wrapped up in that. If you watch any of my videos, I definitely talk about how I got my start into content, but before that was even a thing, I was making zines off the grid, you know, like I was making art without the use of social media as an aid to promote myself. So I think I really did just honestly build that muscle of making art without eyes on it. But for a lot of the times we live in, that is just what we have. I'm not shading people that are thinking,
how can I make this go viral? How can I make the algorithm pick this up?
It's very vital if you're an artist that primarily makes their income by posting online. Either you're a content creator, maybe you have an online shop like me where you want people to buy your work, or maybe you need to promote real life events that you're going to be at to supplement the IRL work. You know, there's many instances when you may need social media to promote your work, so I'm not shading you at all. But what I'm trying to say is think less of how it's going to market and more so how are you communicating what you want to communicate? Are you trying to say something? Are you fighting for a cause? Are you protesting? You know, I think these things are really important to keep in mind, because when you try to make things to go viral or you try to make things for content that people may like, it can water down your message. It can water down your art. So what I like to do is I work backwards from the content. I don't know if this is going to make any sense because I'm a content creator, right? So I'm not going to say,
don't think about the content. Don't think about going viral.
Of course, my videos are important to me and I want people to watch them and I want people to like what I'm doing. But when I say I'm thinking backwards from the content is more so I'm making what I want to make, right? I make the thing from my heart, from my soul. As cliche as that sounds, I'm making the thing that popped into my brain. And then later I'm thinking, okay, how can I make this interesting to look at for other people? Because the first main audience was me. I like it. So right off the jump, I'm a fan of what I made, but how can I make other people also be a fan of it? That's how I think of my content, but I don't try to make the zine to go viral, if that makes sense. I'll make the zine first. I'll make it exactly how I wanted to make it without thinking about any outside influences at all. It was based off of whatever popped up in my brain and whatever inspired me. I made the thing. Now it's like, okay, how can I make the thing as exciting to other people as it is to me? I would really advise you, if you're a newbie to zines, to avoid watering down your message to be more palatable to other people, because that's the thing too. I feel like the more specific you are about yourself, the more it draws in people just like you. It's like that story. There's a story I used to love growing up.
Masks by Shel Silverstein. She had blue skin, and so did he. He kept it hid, and so did she. They searched for blue their whole life through, then passed right by and never knew.
So you see how they missed each other? Because they're both hiding their true selves. They're wearing those big freaking masks, looking ridiculous, looking like everybody else, that they didn't even realize there were freaks among them. There are other people just like them in the world too. So I feel like that's how I approach my zine making is, okay, maybe this is weird. I mean, most things that people say are weird, I don't even know is weird because I'm just making it because I like it. And then a comment I'll get a lot is like, I love your weird brain, or I love whatever's wrong with you. I didn't realize because I was just making it for myself, right? Or I'm making it for my community or for like-minded people. So I think that's where your focus should be. It's literally about communicating your ideas, sharing your art, sharing your heart, sharing your words, sharing whatever you want to share fearlessly, bravely, and knowing deep down that when you do that, your tribe will come. You know, build it, they will come. That's something I try to think in my head. I think if you make a zine and it happens to go viral after you post it, that's great, but that should not be the first priority, right? I'm not just pulling this out of my ass. I'm saying this because I've learned this over the years, okay? I used to make things to try to go viral and it burnt me out and made me sick. So I had to stop doing that. And then I take lots of breaks too. That's another thing about being an artist or a zine maker is I think people think you have to be on, go, post. I don't think you should just post whatever. I think you should post what speaks to your soul. And I know that sounds so corny, but I think you should post what makes you excited. I think you should post what you would like to see posted. I think you should be making the type of content you would want to watch and consume. But at the same time, I think it's okay to take breaks. There's so many times where I take a hiatus where people are like, Bree, you okay? You kind of fell off. I didn't fall off. I'm recuperating. I'm growing as a person. If you feel like you're getting wrapped up in the whole, I gotta make viral zines, slow down, take a break, baby, mama, breathe. In and out. And just sit. Let's just sit for a second, actually. This is nice. Also, I do want to give a shout out to a video I saw. Okay, this will help you out a lot. So if you're getting bogged down and you're comparing yourself to other people's zines that you see going viral, or maybe you look at my work, okay? Because I'm very self-aware. I have a lot of followers and a lot of eyes on me. People are watching my work. I did not always have that, okay? I had to start somewhere, and people have seen a lot of my flops, a lot of my failures, and now I kind of leaned into my own style. But that's not to say that everything I make is gonna go viral or get a lot of views, okay? But if that's an issue for you, where you're like, I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to listen to you, okay? You got people looking at your zines. I don't have anybody looking at my zines. Fair. But I want you to get out of that mindset of, I need virality. And a video I think you would really love. This YouTube video by August S called Go Make a Zong. What is a zong, you may ask? Well, a zong is just like zines, but bad, which I think is a little redundant because I think zines are already bad in the sense that they're so expressive that they can look like whatever you want. A lot of you know that I love to make zongs, okay? But what I'm saying, when I first saw the video, I'm like, we have strayed so far where people think that zines have to look good, that someone came up with their own word for a bad zine and they called it zongs because they were so sick of seeing polished zines. We've strayed so far, but the video is really fun. It's really expressive and it really just allows you to let go. So if you need to think of zines in a different way, I definitely suggest you watching that video. They're making zines, okay? But just have a little bit fun with it and just call it a zong if you need to. If you're so concerned with making your zine marketable or palatable or whatever you want people to like it, definitely watch that video. I think it'll change your perspective a little bit. And we've reached the third and final tip of advice of a mistake I would avoid if I was beginning to make zines for the first time or if I was making my first zine, and that is following too many damn rules. I think a lot of zine makers, when they're starting out, they're looking for a lot of advice online, okay? And a lot of people have sent me some videos of people giving zine advice that I don't like. Because it is too technical. It's saying, oh, don't make little small text because then people can't read it. Okay, I kind of like little small text that I can't read because it's very expressive. If I see something like that, I'm quick to assume like, man, does this person feel frustrated in terms of their vision? Not technical vision of how they see, but in terms of like trying to convey an idea and I don't know how to do it. So now I'm printing this small tiny text so the person that's reading it can't even read it. So this is how it feels to be in my brain. I can't even see my own visions. I can't even convey it on paper. I'll see things that say like, don't use contradictory colors that are like hard on the eyes. A lot of things with the eyes, I guess, because a lot of our art is visual, but I say the rules. Do whatever you want, okay? If you want to make super tiny text, go ahead. If you want to use highlighter yellow in the background and then light blue on the top so it gives your readers a headache, then do that. Maybe that's a part of your creative process, right? I would say don't even listen to me. Like, who am I? I'm just a Zinetober online sharing my perspective, but I'm not always right. You may not even agree with some of the rules that I wrote down. I have my paper here, my notes. Maybe you don't agree with any of them. Maybe you're like, Bree, you don't know what the you're talking about. That's fair. Don't listen to anybody, okay? This is what I'm trying to say. Following too many rules when you're first starting out is really contradicting the whole purpose of making a zine. Your zine is for you to express yourself without mainstream media rejecting you because you're not too polished for their editorial magazines, without needing an editor to okay and approve of your work. You can have shitty grammar. You can have typos if you want. You can have cut off margins that cut too much into the image, so now you can't even see what the picture's supposed to be. You can have that. That's all allowed. I like when zines felt like you're being a kid again. That's how they feel for me. But I do see out in the world they're straying a little bit, where people are just making full-on magazines that cost $60 and calling it a zine, because I think they're using zine as a shorthand for magazine. And I get it. Words evolve over time. That happens. But I want us to remember the history of why zines were even created and what their purpose is for, okay? Because if you don't remember the history, it starts losing its meaning over time, and then people get really confused. And that's like my biggest fear with zines, is that people think that a zine has to look like a polished, full, high glossy, high produced, mass produced magazine, when that's not really what it is. And if you want to hear me yap about that, I made I made a YouTube video 3 years ago where I say zines are not magazines. And this is not shading magazines. There are a lot of great literary and art magazines out there that are self-published and that are produced the same way that zines are, where it's all on your own, there's no editors or anything. But zines are a lot different, okay? And this is why. This is why you can watch this video. But like I said, what I say, like what anybody says, you don't need fancy materials, you don't need a lot of money, you don't have to get approval, you don't need permission for it. You could just start today with trash. You could just take things that you have laying around. So you can be inspired by anything, and you don't need a lot of money to do it. It's very accessible. I want zines to be accessible again. I really do. That's what this whole video is about. It's just getting you out of that mindset that your zines have to be a certain way. I don't want you to worry about font choice. I don't want you to worry about number pages. I don't want you to worry about what it's supposed to look like. I want you to just create. It's very important that we learn the guidelines of zines. Like I said, it's just as important to learn the history of zines too, and why they're created. Zines are supposed to break the rules, okay? That's what they're made for. They were made for rule breakers. They were made because people weren't getting published in mainstream media, or they were getting pigeonholed or categorized as something that didn't honestly fit them. So they decided to make the publications themselves. They decided to print themselves, and that gave them power. It put power back in the hands of the creator. That's what zines are for. So when I say that there are no rules, it doesn't mean like, oh, willy-nilly, like, okay, the magazines can be zines then. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying that there are general guidelines, right? And some of mine personally are, one, I want them to be accessible. I want them to be very cheap to make, and I want them to be very free-spirited in the sense that they're not super polished and they didn't cost an arm and a leg to be able to reproduce and distribute. But now that I know the guidelines, I can move around them. A lot of people say that my zines aren't real zines because I'm using trash or some kind of elements that they haven't seen used before in zines. But it's like, it didn't cost me an arm and leg to use those things. They were accessible. I went through my garbage can and that's what I found. That's what I had on hand. I used a napkin at a bar because I was inspired. I took a Wendy's cup, an empty Frosty cup that I had. I cut it in half, and then I made a zine out of the paper bag. That did not cost me $1 million to make. So to me, it's a zine, you know what I mean? I'm trying to put the picture in your head of like, don't limit yourself. Don't limit yourself because people say there are all these rules about it. Make whatever kind of zine that you want, okay? Really don't worry about it too much, as long as it follows the general guidelines of zines. Those were just mine, but there are like a lot out there. Zines existed before me. I didn't invent zines, but I feel like zines can evolve to be something where it's not just paper, as long as it's accessible, right? But that's just me. Like I said, you may not agree with me, but I'm just sharing based off of my experiences, right? That's all I can do, is just share based off of my own lived experiences. And as a zine maker, I gotta say, I'm having a lot of fun. I'm never stressed out with zines too much. I mean, when I have an idea that's a little ambitious, of course, it stresses me out, but it's a good challenge to have. And I never really stress too much about the margins on my paper, because I'll print it out. Like, when you print a mini zine and it has the white border all all around, I don't stress because I'll just cut them off. Or I'll fold it up with the margins. I don't care because I think that's what a zine should be. It should be whatever you want it to be. That's what I'm saying, is I see a lot of people stressed out because they think it has to be this professional, glossy thing, and it really doesn't. It really doesn't. If you want to print in tiny text, print in tiny text. If you want to print something sideways, so now when I'm reading the zine, I gotta flip it over, then do that. If you want to scribble, like say you print something out and then you scribble all over it with blue marker, and then you make photocopies of that, do that. Use what you have. The jankier, the better. Don't wait, okay, until you have the better printer or the better materials or the iPad, okay? You can start today with just whatever you have around you, all right? I think when you wait around to have the right materials for a zine, you're just delaying making stuff. You're just procrastinating at that point. You really don't need to wait for anything. And if you need tips on where to get materials very cheaply so you can get inspired without breaking the bank, I have a whole playlist where I do zine hauls and I show you some of the stuff that I got for mostly under $20. But like I said, you can always use what's around you. You can use trash. I also have a whole Make a Zine with Me playlist where I show you my process. And I'm not, you guys, sometimes people accuse me, like they'll see stuff that I've made and they're like,
Oh, must be nice to have money to do that.
I'm using literal trash most of the time. I'm not using anything fancy. I'm not doing anything out of the norm, okay? I'm just using my imagination. But you let me know what you think because the video's over now. I got pretty excited. When I get fired up, I just be spewing things. I don't even know what I said. Honestly, I think I blacked out. But don't forget to make zines for Zinetober. This is posted in Zinetober, which is October. If you don't know what Zinetober is, I have another video about that. I got zine videos up the wazoo. That's it for today's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you want to support me, share this video with someone who may like to hear me yap. Or just subscribe, I guess. Thank you. Bye.